Hi, my name is Hannah Jane Pritchett, current U of A GIST Master's student. Welcome to the University of Arizona GIST podcast. Our host is Chris Lukenbiel, and today he will be chatting with Ben Schaub, manager of the Enablement team in professional services at ESRI. Let's get started.
Hi, my name is Chris Lukenbiel. I am the director of the UA GIST programs, and today on the podcast we have Ben Schaub with ESRI, who's the manager of the Enablement team and professional services. Hey Ben, thanks for joining us.
Hey Chris, thanks for the invite.
Well, it's been, oh my gosh, now I feel like I'm going to date both of us, Ben,
Yeah.
and say at least a decade since I last saw you at
close.
U of A graduation. Ben was a MSGIST alumni from the original 2011 group.
That's right, yeah.
And you've done quite a lot since then. I believe you started directly with ESRI after the GIST programs. Is that correct?
Yeah, I did actually. I think just a few months after we wrapped up, I had a position at ESRI that took me to Washington, D.C., and I joined the professional services division there. I was a consultant and project manager where it's kind of an interesting space where we're really working with the people side of the technology, right? So, of course, at ESRI, we develop the products, but we have to actually help people use them too and apply them to their own business. And so that's really where professional services comes in, where we are helping our users really get the most out of that investment they've already made in the technology. And so that's kind of where I began right after graduation, and then that journey has certainly continued since then over the past several years.
So how is it different, than say, like a support analyst or something for ESRI, where it's, I mean, you mentioned you do have a different role. And I think it's interesting for people to understand that, as we say in class, that GIS isn't just about the software or the analysis, but it's about the peopleware too.
Yeah.
What does your team do? Like, what do you do in sort of a daily activities for your job?
Yeah, I think I'll talk about professional services broadly, and then we can kind of focus on what I do too. But we're a really large part of ESRI. Actually, we're kind of where ESRI began, right? Consulting services, helping people solve real-world problems with data and GIS. And over time, right, I think the products have kind of taken the highlights, but that professional services aspect is still really core to who we are as an organization, essentially. And so within our division, we have all sorts of roles. People who are on the business side, like me, who might be looking at the finances, they might be contracts or legal, they might be like me who are overseeing programs and projects at scale, maybe like as a project manager or an advisor, somebody who's really guiding work and making sure it's tracking. We have proposals teams that work with customers and our business development teams to really kind of build out solutions and really sell our people to come help them be successful. And then we have all of our technical experts, staff who maybe specialize in implementing and configuring core ArcGIS products. We have others who may be developers who can maybe extend our products with some custom code to do certain things. We have others who are solution system architects who can design kind of resilient systems and help implement the technology in those areas as well. And we do this globally and across all sectors and industries. So our key business, the customers we work with the most are typically in national government or state and local government, but we also work with utilities and nonprofits and commercial organizations, retail, finance, everything that you can imagine all over the world. And so it's a pretty exciting space because I guess regardless of your interest or focus, there's probably a role somewhere in professional services for those people. We've been growing quite large. So that is kind of what we do broadly. Now my role's evolved a bit. I really do sit on the people side of that. So I love technology. I love GIS. And of course, developed a lot of those skills from your program, Chris, when I was there nearly a decade ago. That was a great foundation that complemented some of the business skills I'd had previously. And so coming into ESRI and in professional services, I was able to be that almost that frontline resource, different from support or maybe some of these other groups at ESRI. We really are working with the customers to kind of develop the next solution, right? So we may be working with a local government that wants to implement ArcGIS Online to, solve some particular constituent needs. And so they may hire professional services to come in and help them design that solution or design that implementation of the technology. And then we may come in and help configure and install and get it all wired up. And then I think really what's at the heart of our identity in professional services is this concept of enablement. We don't just want to drop a bunch of technology into a customer and then disappear, right? We want them to be successful with that. So there's this knowledge transfer component. It's training, but it's kind of hands-on training, and it's different than maybe a class or a course that you'd go to. We have our consultants go into that organization and really just work side by side with the customer to help them understand how their data and how their business needs and business use cases can be realized, right, through technology, and help them through that. So then when we leave at the end of that engagement, at the end of that project or whatever it is, they can still be self-sufficient and productive and successful with that technology. So that's really key to us, right? We want to enable our users to be as successful as possible. And so that knowledge transfer component is really a key aspect of a lot of the engagements that we do with our customers.
How many projects or enablements do you go through in a year? I mean, you personally are just like, what's the scope like? Is it?
Yeah. Well, within professional services broadly, we typically have in a year over 1,500 engagements with customers.
Oh, wow.
And those can be like large, like multi-month, multi-year transformational turnkey solutions, down to maybe you're just getting 20 hours of like support from a developer who's coming in and just helping somebody kind of get over the next step, and then they can move on. So it really, there's a spectrum of level of engagement, right? And it depends on whether the customer just wants us to do everything for them, or whether they want to do it with just a little shot in the arm help from ESRI where it makes sense. So that's broadly what we do, about 1,500 programs or engagements a year. Now, in the role I had prior to my current role, which is the enablement manager, I managed a portfolio of our business called the Advantage Program. And this is we've had this program at ESRI for just over 16 years now, and it's become key to what we do in professional services. This is an ongoing year-over-year relationship that we have with our customers to really become a partner in their success. And so not only are we helping them implement things and build things and train and learn, but we're also helping them think proactively and strategically about how do they make the most out of that technology for the next 6 months, or maybe the next year, maybe the next several years. So it's us with the insight of the roadmap of where the technology is heading, helping a customer be successful. We've got today about 700 customers who are in this program, and that's a portfolio that I was managing for some time.
Okay. So what would be the difference, let's say, between a customer that would go to the support services team versus your team? Like when do like I'm thinking of, in my world, I could think of the city of Tucson. I know that their customer support team has representatives, and
right,
if they're doing a new project, they'll call Dale and say, hey, what's going on? Or, help us figure out our new customer service about brush and bulky pickup, or what I mean? Like they get stuck on something. When does that become something different, where the person says, no, we need, or ESRI says, hey, no, you really should see the management of the enablement team?
Yeah. Well, so a couple things there, right? So they probably come see professional services, and maybe we can talk about my enablement team role in a bit, because it's a bit different. I think tech support's probably the most common way like users probably engage with ESRI services. And I'll just generalize saying ESRI services, because we have lots of teams. We have the tech support teams, we have our training kind of instructor teams, and then we have like our consultants and professional services. So there's this broad community of people here at ESRI whose job it is to help our users be successful. And tech support really fits that that need when you have like a reactive need, right? You're working on something, you run into a problem, and you need to get help. It could end up being a bug or a defect, or it could just be that you need somebody to work through it with you to resolve that. It's very tactical. The idea is that it would be as kind of as short as possible to get you to resolution so you can move on. Sometimes you may want assistance that's a bit more proactive. So before you've actually implemented something, you want to start thinking about, hey, what is the right architecture for me based on what I want to do? Or what might be the right solution for me in the whole suite of solutions that Esri has? Or how can I actually use that solution and apply it to my business? That's really where tech support's going to say you should talk with professional services, because these are experts who know industry, who also know the technology and can help you with that actual work, right? So it's more than just solving a problem or answering a question for you. It's really a bit more involved, a bit more hands-on. Either we're working with you as a customer, or we may actually be doing it for a customer. So I guess to say tech support is kind of the tactical reactive model when you've got an urgent question and you need an answer. Professional services fits the bill when you need a higher level of engagement from Esri.
Got it.
Yeah.
So in terms of your background that like helped prepare you for this role, it seems that it's a nice blend of both the sort of the GIS skills and background, but also business skills as well. So, you know, a question I typically would ask on a podcast is like, well, tell us about your GIS training and background. But for you, it seems a little like a blended subject. So
it is.
If I asked you like, well, what sort of education and background prepared you for this role with Esri?
Yeah, well, obviously the GIS program certainly helped, because I think that technical foundation just makes me better at the things I do on the business side, right? We understand the patterns of use, we understand how it works and how it may intersect or support business needs. But going into the program, I had spent some time kind of working in the business sector. I worked for the city of Tucson as a supervisor for years before going into the program. I was also managing a nonprofit that was working globally. And so I had these experiences of managing teams, working with people, building consensus, understanding requirements, right? Things like this that are really essential to the environment where somebody can successfully use technology. Because if you're not doing those things, how do you know you're really applying technology to the right places and making a difference? And so certainly those skills, working in those sectors, helped me going into that. And upon joining Esri, I got a lot of training in proposal writing and project management and understanding, user experience and thinking about things from that perspective, change management, right? And that's really helped me, I think, be successful in this role of bridging that business and tech gap that we see sometimes in organizations.
So can you tell us about, I mean, there might be some confidentiality, so please screen them out in your brain. A project that you might have worked on in the past or present that you're really proud of, or that you've, really made a difference in terms of applying GIS to a work environment that really showed change, in terms of the management and, ability of that system to do better?
Yeah. So one that comes to mind from my days back in DC, I worked with a customer called the International Joint Commission, and it's a kind of an ambiguous name, but they do really cool things. They manage the watershed between Canada and the United States, and so it's part of the State Department here, but it's jointly managed out of our State Department and then the Ministry of Interior in Canada, right? And so it's this partnership between our two countries to really manage that watershed. And so you can imagine, right, mapping and geography is really essential to all of their business and everything they do. And for years, I worked with that organization to actually implement ArcGIS Online and get all these information products created. So there was kind of this web-based view of those watersheds and how they were managed. And even just something as simple as that was really transformational to that organization that was spread throughout the entire boundary area that wasn't used to looking at things through a web GIS. And now they were able on demand to go in to see these boundaries, to see assets related to these boundaries in near real time, all being fed from an enterprise GIS that was managed out of DC and Ottawa. And so we could really see the commissioners and others in this organization start to really show an interest in GIS, right? They maybe hadn't thought about it before. They had a lot of paper maps. They had an entire, I guess you could think of it as like an entire room full of books of paper maps that went back hundreds of years. And they were now kind of going through this effort to essentially modernize their approach to understanding, the area of interest. And so, using ArcGIS Server with ArcGIS Online, we were able to actually digitize a lot of that and make it on demand for, a larger group, a larger part of the organization.
Wow, that's really cool. Are they?
Yeah.
Have you kept up with that group, or are they, still actively using GIS?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they're still using it. I haven't been involved for a few years now, but it's been, they continue to use that to run their business every day, right? Everyone's got those resources bookmarked in their browser. They're in there leveraging that technology every day, which is really, I think, the key to success, right? It's that people use it, and then it makes their lives a little bit easier. And we see that at the IJC, so we're really excited about that.
Oh, cool. So what would you say for, a new student or somebody trying to break into the industry that, might have some business skills like yourself, is kind of working on their GIS skills? Like, what are some of the things that you might recommend for people to do to get to that next step in their career?
Yeah. I mean, I think a couple things come to mind. They're the things I share with a lot of, prospective new hires at ESRI too. It's the technology is important, right? We do have these business-oriented roles within ESRI. And of course, your primary daily function may not mean that you're touching technology every day. But having that technical foundation, I think brings credibility to the conversations you're having with customers, right? And it brings a connection that you have with the organization. So I think developing that technical foundation is key. The other thing is to be a little bit entrepreneurial, I'll say. Outgoing, looking for opportunities, looking for problems to solve, and coming with solutions. So I think none of my career at ESRI has been linear. I'll say, I got into a role and I've been able to kind of move into new roles that are a better fit for me at ESRI because I've identified problems that need to be solved, and you put energy towards that, and so it's always kind of having that hat on, looking for how to make things better, how to improve things, building your network, which is absolutely key at ESRI and beyond, right? It's just getting to know people and making those connections and leaning on them where you can. So that's been really helpful too.
So how do you keep up with sort of the changes in technology with GIS? Is that something that ESRI does for its employees, or do you have to extend beyond your career to keep up? Like, what are some of the tactics that you use in your career to stay current?
Yeah, it's changing all the time, and it changes really fast, right? And I think, like, even back when I was in the program, it was the early days of ArcGIS Online. I think a majority of what we did in class was still kind of desktop based.
Yes.
And I mean, even since then, it's just been a transformation in the industry, right? And so it's always changing. So it's kind of maintaining that healthy capacity to learn and having that interest. For me, my day-to-day job doesn't give me a lot of opportunities, again, to be hands-on with the text. So for me to stay current, I get heavily involved in a majority of our conferences. So 3 to 4 times a year, at least before COVID, I was, in person at the conferences. Either sometimes I would lead a tech session, or I would certainly be involved in meetings and working the floor and getting the feedback from plenary and stuff. And so for me, that's a great way for me to kind of keep a pulse on where we're headed with the technology. Also, where I'm at in professional services now, I manage a team called the Enablement team. And our team is now more internally focused. We're responsible for making sure that our staff and professional services have all the skills they need to be successful in their work. And so there's a technical angle to that. And so from my purview, I work very closely with technical support and training services and other parts of the organization to make sure that the latest capabilities or the latest trends, the things in the area that the technology is evolving is something that we have training developed for our own staff to learn on it. So I'm kind of on the tip of the spear in that sense, where I get a sense of like what's coming down the pipe and how can our team work with these other teams to make sure that like our workforce understands that so they can go out and be experts in the field on that technology. So it may be that we're crafting internal webinars on new technology. We do that a lot. We have lunch and learns almost every week within professional services to keep everybody aware of what's happening and where the technology is heading. We have product briefings several times a year where product development will come in and share what they're working on so that professional services, it's important for professional services to have that early insight, because once it's released, customers are going to want help with it. And we need to know and be prepared to come in and do that, right? So there's a lot of that internal knowledge and tech transfer that's happening on a regular basis within the organization.
So what do you see as some of the new technologies coming out of ESRI and elsewhere that are kind of like what you see as sort of like, you better know about these if you're coming out of the Chris's GIS program. If you want to get into the industry, you better, kind of be looking at this stuff. Might not be big now, but it's going to be soon. And I know that, I guess I should ask it in a two-part question. One is like some of the trends in ESRI of items that are becoming prominent, maybe in your area, and just sort of big scope geospatial things that you see on the horizon that your group kind of has to keep in the back of your mind.
Yeah. Well, I think one big thing, and this is a priority for ESRI, but I think we see it across the industry as well, and it's not new, but it's really important, I think, to understand for people who want to have future careers, in this area, is this move towards enterprise GIS, right? So Web GIS has really opened up these amazing opportunities to get GIS capabilities into the hands of everybody in an organization. It's no longer compartmentalized or siloed to IT and GIS. You've got people in organizations who are at the leadership levels who are, looking at analysis and maps to make decisions. You've got people, in procurement and HR departments who are using GIS. It's just expanded to every area of a business. And so that's a huge trend. ESRI's putting a lot of energy into it with, our ArcGIS Enterprise technology. And I think that's just going to continue to grow, right? So being able to, I guess the more and more we're doing is thinking about how do we enable people to share these capabilities and information better. And I guess, so narrowing that down to ESRI, there's been a push in the last couple of years for this concept of distributed GIS. Right, we've got, you may have your own ArcGIS Enterprise instance that you're using to run your business, but a lot of us don't run our business in silos either. We lean on other organizations, and you can think like at the government level, there's lots of collaboration that needs to happen at different tiers of government. So how can we bring our GIS together in a distributed way, almost like a system of systems, as Jack will refer to it as, to like have that interconnectedness. So we're all sharing information, in the best way possible to kind of build out these new solutions. So that's really, I think, a trend that's happening now, and that's really the direction this is heading, right? That equitable access to the technology across an organization and connecting organizations with organizations through a system to really have a lot of power behind it. Another thing that I'll mention that's, I think, really hot right now within ESRI specifically, we're putting energy into this, and I don't understand it entirely, but it's this Kubernetes and containerization, and how do we really build like more rapidly scalable solutions and systems. And so Kubernetes is kind of an open source platform that gives us the ability to containerize technology to really reduce the need for on-prem infrastructure and even cloud infrastructure to an extent. And so again, this is something I know we're still getting smart on, and I think we're looking at how do we build our tech to be taking advantage more of things like Kubernetes, but that's certainly an area that I think is going to grow a lot. And for people who are really kind of on the technical side of things, that's worth digging into right now, I believe.
Oh, wow. No, that's cool. I mean, over my career of watching ESRI and the GIS industry, it's fun to watch how different industries or different companies, like lead certain trends or respond to trends and then become the leaders in those trends. Or, it's like this ecosystem model of, and ESRI's always right in the mix of this as well. And I'm glad you brought up the last comment, because one of the big trends, that I've seen in education is this drive for open source GIS, big data, and how to do data manipulation at scales unimaginable before, or
Right.
analysis at unimaginable scales. And what does that mean for? It's almost like the dissolution of desktop in a way, And ESRI's been doing that too with the complete move to web and cloud. As well. So it's really exciting time, but also a little scary if you're just getting into the market or getting into the industry and getting your feet wet.
Yeah, it can be. You have to get comfortable with change. Maybe that's another key to success.
Yeah.
Because when we look at people, like I think about like what I knew when I joined ESRI, even from a technical perspective, that's had to entirely change, right? So you can never get too comfortable with a skill set. You have to always, again, have that, I think, that passion, that energy to keep learning more, because I can guarantee like the state of the market today is going to be completely different in 2 or 3 years. And so you've got to keep up. When I joined, I mean, Flex and Silverlight were the premier,
Yes.
APIs for web and right. And that's just, you wouldn't think of putting any energy in that now, right? It's all moved to, at least for us, JavaScript. And so things are always evolving. And I think there'll still be a role for desktop, we continue to grow ArcGIS Pro and its capabilities and as kind of the next generation in that. And there'll be premier GIS professionals who live and work in those environments. But yeah, I mean, as I talked about this concept of web GIS and moving things to web and keeping the platform open and extensible has given us the ability to really get GIS into the hands of people that never ordinarily would have touched it. All right. So that's really powerful and exciting for us.
Actually, you brought up a wonderful topic, and for me and you, it's sort of like, what are those keys to a successful career in GIS? I mean, you said change, and I have to agree. It's one that we wouldn't think of the most. 2, keeping up, right? Yeah. Which is formidable, I feel. And change just overruns you if you're not careful, but it should be exciting. But can you think of, like, for you, maybe personally, as well as just, thinking broadly, what are some of the keys to a successful career in GIS, and maybe what have been key to your career in GIS?
So maybe the thing I look for the most, like when I interview candidates at ESRI for technical roles, is their ability to think about the end user, right? So, I mean, in GIS, you can build all the analysis and all the solutions you want, but it's never going to be successful unless it actually informs someone's decisions, or it solves some kind of business need or business goal. So I think one key to success for people who are going into this industry is to be able to think about who's going to be using this workflow or this product or this dashboard at the end of the day. What decisions do they need to make, and how can I make this easier for them? So I don't know if that makes sense, but it's almost like this user experience orientation and thinking about, like, what are the requirements, and am I really achieving those requirements, and how do I know what success looks like at the end of the day, and thinking about that deliberately before you start to get into something and building something, right? What does success like? How do I know when I'm successful? And then how can I measure that? And so there is really a human aspect to everything we do, even though we may be working in the technology every day. And I think it's important to not lose that.
Huh.
So in our organization, even we're thinking more about concepts like change management. And that can mean a lot of things, but we think about people change management. So think about people who've moved from maybe like a desktop oriented architecture to now they've got this web oriented architecture and everybody's touching GIS. How do we make sure that people actually adopt those changes and actually use it and are happy with it, right? So there's that human element to everything we do, thinking about how we make it easier and better and incentivize people to actually take advantage and get value out of the work that we're all doing at a technical level. So that's really key, I think, for me.
I like the concept of change management because it seems key to change in GIS. Like when I first started as a professor, the change management was getting the planning department to talk to the assessors department and trying to have them agree that going digital is a good thing to collect taxes better. Like that was the huge thing in 2000. Now it's like even thinking about having that digital discussion is ancient now. So what is the discussions today in change management, like with groups that you're dealing with? What's the big changes that you see within groups to make them geospatially ready or sustainable within their organization?
There's a bigger topic here that we've been kind of pioneering in my space for a few years now at ESRI, and it's gotten some legs. It's this concept of geospatial strategy. And we boil it down. We call it ESRI, the ESRI Method. That's how we refer to it. It's not a new way of working with organizations, but it's a framework to think about as we do work with organizations. And it boils down to 3 stupid, simple steps, which is understand, plan, and then act. And a lot of geospatial specialists or analysts or technicians get really involved in the act phase. That's building things, that's implementing things, that's operating things. But if we didn't really understand what the business needed and what those priority objectives were, what are the common challenges and what does success look like, then we never really had a plan to address those business needs. And then how can we act in any kind of informed way? And so when we think about change management, or when we think about how anybody can help an organization really be geospatially ready, we have to understand what matters to the business, like what keeps leadership up at night. And then how does technology intersect that, right? Like how can we, like where are the geospatial components to those challenges, and how can we start to apply technology to maybe resolve some of those issues? That's the plan stage. And from there, once you've got that informed plan, and maybe there's a change management plan, which is a part of that, which is how do we help people come along and adopt maybe some changes we make to their daily work habits, then we can act. We can start to design a solution. We can implement that, operate it. And maybe we need to revisit. Did we actually achieve what we set out to achieve, or do we need to pivot and take another direction? So this has become really part of our DNA at ESRI and within our services teams to be thinking about that. Understand first, then plan, and then act. And don't just jump right into building something without really knowing why and being able to measure the success of it.
It seems like that topic, the geospatial strategy topic in general, gets at a difference between sort of like GIS management and a GIS analyst role, and where you've been, let me take the liberty of saying, think more broadly in terms of how do I manage a larger project or a service, rather than how do I solve a problem like a habitat or watershed sustainability. Right. How, I guess, that's a tough area for people to think about if they're not in that, or haven't been exposed to that. And I often feel that the best way to learn GIS management is through doing it, or get exposed to it, and then experience is the best way of knowledge. I mean, I'm not sure if that's the correct way of saying it, but how do you get people, interested, or what? How do you learn about GIS management? How do you get involved with that? Let's say if you're trying to move up in the industry, you're already an analyst, like what's the next steps? What would you recommend for those people?
Yeah, I think if let's say you're working kind of at the analyst level and you're looking for what's next. I think even in some ways that's kind of how I started here at ESRI. It's perhaps, being responsible for a certain body of work, and after a while it's looking for opportunities to own more of that. And so it may be just becoming like a tech lead on a small project that you might be working on, or if you, I don't know, in like agile terms, maybe Scrum Master, something like that, right? So looking for opportunities to maybe own a bit more of the responsibility of completing a project. And then after a while, it's looking for opportunities to maybe manage multiple projects or multiple engagements at the same time, right? And it doesn't mean that you're managing people, right? You just maybe partnered with other analysts to complete a certain task. But I think it's looking for opportunities for just greater responsibility within those areas, and maybe you take on some of the accountability of getting one of those tasks done and move up from there. The other thing I think that I would say is ask questions, right? And so, even when I talk about geospatial strategy, and it's this big topic, even an analyst or a developer has a role to play in that story. And so it's asking why and trying to understand maybe some of the business reasons that are driving some of the work that you're doing day to day. And in organizations where you're funded through grants or through things like that, it's maybe getting involved in that process as well. So being more than just the technician or the analyst who's completing the work, how do you get ahead of that as like a subject matter expert that may be informing content that goes into some kind of proposal or bid or something like that. So that's another area too, is to get involved in a bit more of the life cycle of an engagement or a project, and getting involved a little earlier. I think that can help too.
And I think along with that, understanding the life cycle of the engagement is realizing too, is if you move to that management realm, you're not going to have as much time as you did in the past to probably keep up with the technology, because you're learning a whole new sets of skills and whole new understandings, which we had a GIS leadership podcast, and that was one of the common themes of it with people in Arizona, was like, there's trade-offs in your career, that you can't do it all, but know what you're doing and do it well, that kind of thing. So one of the common questions with the leadership group in Arizona was sort of like, so how do you keep up with technology when you're not allowed time to keep up with technology? You know what I mean? Like, you can't do it all. You're asked to do these things, and sometimes those other things some things are going to fall on the wayside because they have to keep up with higher order stuff. Yeah. How do you negotiate those sort of needs in your career, Ben, when you can't you can't do it all?
That was a very clear decision I had to make at a point in my career at ESRI, because when I was in DC for the first 4 to 5 years of my time here, I was partly technical. I would go on site and do implementations, and then come back to the office and write a proposal or manage a project. I was like a 50-50 split, and I loved it. And I think doing both of those things made me better at the other thing, if that makes sense. But as I moved out to Redlands about 4 years ago, I really had to decide, am I going to continue to stay technical, or do I need to move more towards the business side? And I chose the business. And I think the first thing is acknowledging that when you make a choice like that, you're not going to have the same level of technical knowledge you had before, right? So you have to kind of let go in some ways and understand that, like, that, you're moving in a different direction. But for me, like I said, attending conferences really helps. I do carve out time during my work to kind of keep up with technology, whether it's watching a webinar or maybe even doing a technical training. When I first came over, I started to actually look at ways to run the business side of my team with GIS, because we weren't using it at all. Even within ESRI, we weren't. And so that was a fun little pet project for me, was to kind of build some maps and apps to help manage our portfolios. And we use them every day now. Every day we're in these maps and we're using them, and we're kind of like eating our own dog food in a sense. And so it was kind of finding those opportunities to kind of keep my hands on the tech, to feel like I still have that connection to what I always loved. So that's another strategy you can use too, which has helped me a lot.
So how about for a last question, and let's focus on the podcast listeners here and say, what's the best advice you could give to someone wanting to start a career in the geospatial industry?
I'd say, well, first and foremost, I think always be forward looking, right? And do everything you can to stay relevant. So I love the questions we talked about, what's next and what's trending in the industry. I think understand that and know that. And I know for what we look for in candidates here at ESRI, it's not so much what you know today, but your capacity to what you could know in a year, right? So I guess my recommendation would be is to always, I guess, foster that concept of curiosity and passion, right? And be able to demonstrate that, right? With what you're involved in or how you stay informed on what's happening within the industry. Those are really key things. And then understanding how the work that you might do at whatever level you're going into impacts other things and being able to talk about that. I think always rolling things up to the big picture is key in understanding where you are, and it gives you the ability to kind of evolve and mature, of course, within your own career as you move forward as well.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you for joining us today, Ben. It's been wonderful to have you, and I'm looking forward to learning more about what the enablement team and professional services does in the future. Is there any way that people that are interested in what your program does can find out more information?
Yeah, so I guess at a couple levels, right? So on the Esri.com website, we have a whole area of the website for Esri services, and that's professional services is a part of that, along with the Advantage program, which I talked about, and there's some public-facing information there. But people are more than welcome to reach out to me directly as well, and I don't know if we can make my email address available. It's bschaub@esri.com, and I'm happy to take questions on professional services or Esri, or even the enablement work that we're doing internally to kind of help our workforce be better and more successful for our customers. So definitely happy to answer questions and help where I can.
All right, great. Thanks a lot, Ben.
Yep. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for the opportunity.